I'm going to erase my number line. And now we're going to do negative 14. So I don't remember where I put the 0. Why did I delete it? I don't know why I deleted the 0. I would assume it's right here. I may be wrong. It's okay. So now we have negative 14. I know for a fact I do not have 14 dashes because we barely had 9. So instead of counting by intervals of 1 on the number line, I'm going to count by intervals of 2. So I'm going to count by 2s to help me get up to 14. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Remember what I do on one side of the 0, I want to do to the other side of the 0. So I have negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8, negative 10, negative 12, negative 14. So again, our number this time that we're plotting is going to be negative 14. So I'm going to plot it right here. And then to find the opposite of negative 14, just like I've done the other ones, I want to count how many ticks negative 14 is from 0 to figure out which number is that many ticks away from 0 on the other side, because that's going to tell me the opposite of it. So I start from 0 and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So negative 14 is 7 ticks away from 0 on my number line. So I'm going to count and see which number is 7 ticks away from 0 on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that means, and I'm going to go under instead of over, that the opposite of negative 14 is positive 14. So I'm just going to put 14 right here. Now I need to figure out the opposite of the opposite. So the opposite was 14. So I want to find the opposite of this number. So here's 14. If I go on the other side of the number line, it's going to be negative 14. But then, again, I need to do the opposite of the opposite. So the opposite of negative 14, well, again, it was positive 14. Okay, some of you are probably like, oh, but so do I get it? And that's great. So now I'm going to do this last one, and then I'm going to tell y'all, oh, why did I erase the 0? It's okay. I think it'll go right here. I'm assuming. I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to do this last one. I'm going to tell you some little tricks and tips. So I have negative 63. Now I know for a fact, I do not have 63 tacks. So I will not be counting by 1. And I also don't think I'm going to count by 5s. So instead, I'm going to count by 10 to get to 63. So I'm going to do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. And I'm going to go up to 70. So same thing I do on this side, I want to do to the opposite side. So 10, 20, negative 10, negative 20, negative 30, negative 40, negative 50, negative 60, negative 70. So I want to plot negative 63. Now this is going to be a little tricky because I don't have a tick on my number line that says negative 63. So I'm going to have to put a tick mark I'm going to plot it in between 2 tick marks. So if I think of 63, right? What two numbers on my number line do you think 63 is going to be in between? If you're saying 60 and 50, you're off by a little bit. It's not going to be 60 and 50. It's going to be 60 and 70. So right here is going to be negative 63. So I want to count how many times or how many ticks negative 63 is away from 0. So if I count, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half-ish. A little bit and a half. So I need to figure out what's going to be on the other side. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half-ish, I'm going to have positive 63. So to figure out the opposite of this, I'm going to go to the other side that I just marked. And look at that. The opposite of negative 63 is positive 63. And then the opposite of that to save time is going to be negative 63 because we're going to go back in that direction. And then the opposite of the opposite of the opposite is going to be positive 63. So just like how I said over here, opposite of positive is always going to be negative, right? So like how we looked at these two numbers. Well, whenever we have negative numbers, the opposite of those are always going to be positive. So opposite of negative is always positive. So the opposite of a positive is always negative. It's always going to be the negative with the same digit. And then the opposite of a negative is always going to be the positive with the same digit, as you can see in our table. Now, I'm going to tell you now. I'm going to be completely honest with you. On a test or an activity, you're not going to have this last column. You're not going to see this right here. I'm not going to ask you for the opposite of the opposite of the opposite. This was just so y'all can see that that does exist. But you will be asked to find the opposite of the opposite. So a little trick or a little tip to remember that. Let me erase this. Let me erase this. A little trick to help you know what the opposite of a number is if you look on here, let's look at our first number, right? If we go straight to the column that says opposite of the opposite, what do you see about the numbers? If you're saying, Miss Soto, they're the exact same, that is correct. So the opposite of a number is the same number. So if I were to ask you, what's the opposite of 36? Well, that's going to be negative 36. But if I tell you, okay, well, what's the opposite of 36? You should be able to say 36 because the opposite of the opposite is going to be the same number. All right, so now we're going to do some more practice with this, but this time without a number line. So now we're going to use these scenarios, these questions to figure out, to fill in the table, basically. So this says the opposite of a gain of 6. We want to know this answer. We want to figure out what is the opposite of a gain of 6. So to do that, we're going to break down the problem. So the first part I want to answer is, what is a gain of 6? So if I am gaining 6, is that going to be a positive 6 or a negative 6? That's going to be positive. So I'm going to put plus 6 right here. So to figure out the answer to this question of what the opposite of a gain of 6 is, I'm going to answer this question. It asks, what is the opposite of that number? So if the gain of 6 is plus 6, What is the opposite of positive 6? It is negative 6. So our answer is negative 6. So the opposite of a gain of 6 is just negative 6. All right, we're going to do the next one. So the next one says the opposite of a deposit of $10. So we're using our real world situation, a lesson that we learned last week to help us answer these questions. So the opposite of a deposit. Well, the first thing I want to know is, what is a deposit of 10? What does that mean? So remember, if you're depositing money, that means you're going to put money into something. That means you're putting money into a bank account. You're adding money to the bank account. So a deposit of 10 is going to be an action of plus 10. So what is the opposite of positive 10? It's negative 10. If you remember that rule, the opposite of a positive is a negative. So this is going to be negative 10. So that's our answer. Circle them. All right, and then the next one says, this one's a little tricky. It says the opposite of 4. So the first thing we're going to answer is, well, what is the opposite of 4? 4 is a positive number. So what's the opposite of positive 4? Negative 4. No, my bad. Yeah, that's right. I was like, ooh, so no, I confused myself. The opposite of positive 4 is negative 4. So to answer what is the opposite of 4, what is the opposite of this number? What's the opposite of negative 4? Positive 4. So 4 is our answer. And again, if you remember that trick I just told you, remember the opposite of a number is going to be that exact number. All right, and then this last one on this table says the opposite of the loss of 5. So the first thing I want to do is first figure out, well, what is a loss of 5? If I am losing 5, is that a positive or a negative action? If you're losing, that's a negative action. So a loss of 5 is negative 5. But we want to know, well, what is the opposite of negative 5? Well, the opposite of negative 5, if you remember that rule I told you, is going to be positive 5. So to answer this last question, what is the opposite of that number? Or to answer, what is the opposite of loss of 5? So we're going to look at this number to answer the question. What is the opposite of positive 5? Negative 5. So that means the opposite of a loss of 5 is just negative 5. And you'll be doing more practice with this at the end of this, and we'll probably do more practice with this again, if not tomorrow, the next day. All right, so we have one more part to do, and then we'll be done.